this idea that there is a continual balance of three predominant issues or basics to singing. One, the spiritual essence, that thing that we are trying to bring to life and to communicate about a song or an aria. What is it about in an almost existential kind of way? The second would be the emotional context. And under the emotional context, I mean the specificity of what the thing is you're singing. It can be the language, it can be the epoch, it can be certainly the character, the close of the character. Of course, that would fall in the epoch. Certainly the language, and of course the actual heartbeat. What is the actual context of this or that person when they're singing about that thing that gives us the big ticket item that resonates in us as a public? And of course the third, and the probably most significant non-negotiable, the physical elements of singing. And unfortunately, or fortunately you can teach the weakest one from the other two. That's the good news. The bad news is that the entire gestalt is essentially defined by the weakest part of where you are. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to have trouble. If you don't know why you're doing it, you probably shouldn't even try. And if you're not going to be interested in what it is specifically that lines up who you are as that Schubert singer or that Verdi aria, then you'll never reach the thing that you say you want to do as a singer, which is to communicate that what you're singing. Now, that brings me to my most specific thing that I would like to say as a professional to you, a non-professional or another professional, whatever, to you, a singer. I believe that we make, when we sing, thoughts audible. I'm not particularly interested in Fach. I'm not particularly interested in voice types. Now, having said that, it would be stupid for someone with a very light lyric voice to sing Hans Sachs. It would be very silly for a mezzo to sing Tosca, you know. Obvious, that is sort of obvious stuff to me. I don't need a Fach system to understand that. What I need is a brain and sensibilities to know what you can and can't do. And to drive that point home, you know, I simply do not know, believe it or not, of any letter or writings of any major opera composer that wrote about the necessity of a timbre of a voice singing his or her repertoire. I just don't know it. I do know a lot of references and a lot of letters and a lot of writings of very important composers, Verdi, Wagner, Schubert, Mozart, talking about the kinds of people he would like to hear, the kinds of abilities of a singer, especially Verdi wrote very specific, the ability of the singer to, in fact, sing that role, to portray that role, to call that role into life. And this is, to me, what becomes the fundamental point about singing. And that is, if it is about making that which I understand and think audible, hearable, then probably the most important thing I can have is that the breath I take before I sing something is exactly the breath I need as that something to sing it. How I breathe as Onegin is different by nature, de facto, than how I breathe as the Barber of Seville, or Don Giovanni, or Arabella, or Alfredo, or whatever example you want. Now, the point of that, what I would like to drive home and what I hope we can get to today, and we will get today, is that what I think we should get away from, and again, this is my you know, that's why I'm here, my personal belief, is the idea that we suck in air with the intent to make sound which is at the service of something that's going to go to our public. I just think that's too far removed from what we do. I want to hear people think. I think that's why composers wrote the music they wrote. I think genius is the word we use when we describe Verdi's ability to make human emotion audible in melody. It's just unbelievable, uncanny. And we should make that available to people to understand, because that enlivens their fantasy. Because in fact, when we sing, we invite people to participate in our life. If you come out on stage to present your voice, you're going to be nervous, and it will never be what you want it to sing. It's just not going to happen. This is what I believe. I think that also physically, if we take a breath that is unassociated with the thought that makes it audible, you're gonna land on your throat. You're gonna start your sound and then start working on that, what it is that you want to sing. Rather than taking the breath, staying in that place where the breath is, again, probably technically speaking, concentrating much more on the inhaling process and keeping the feeling of inhalation. This is not my idea. This is great singers from Caruso all the way back. Garcia wrote about this very specifically. Keeping the feeling of inhaling. Literally, the intercostal muscles of your ribs that are staying expanded while you breathe through this. But this feeling, you can just concentrate. You want simple thoughts when you're singing. Singers are simple people in the last analysis. You want to have simple thoughts when you're singing. And one of them is keep the feeling of inhaling. That lift. You hear the difference? We hear that a lot. As subtle as that is, I believe that to be the alpha and omega of good singing. Every great singer that I think is great, and the world has called great, every great singer, if you've seen a video or if you've heard the recordings or you've experienced them in person, had a non-negotiable way of starting the sound that was in the sound that was to be heard. Right? So we're going to start with that. That has to be grounded in a certain kind of understanding of how your body works. That, I believe, is non-negotiable. That is, to me, what is truly technical. And I don't want to bounce on and beat on that today. But, in fact, there are things. It isn't the idea that we hear so much today that if it works for that person, it must be okay. I simply can't agree with. You know, if I sit down to the piano in my rather disgusting way and start beating about on it, I actually probably can even smoke myself through a little Mozart sonatino. I don't know anything about playing the piano. Anybody that's a pianist would say, well, great, wonderful potential, very musical, but you know, in fact, this is probably not a good idea, or this is not a good idea, or whatever other damn thing I would do, or after a while. Anybody can see that. The same thing is in singing. The singing technique is based in how your body works. It is not a method. It is not something we invent. It's not something like a lot of conductors, or a few conductors have even maintained to my face, that we learn vibrato one singer to the other and teachers down. It's a bunch of nonsense. It's just simply not true. Vibrato is the most natural evidence of a free vibrating surface. It was discovered by a scientist who made flying possible. His name was Bernoulli. And he discovered and theorized and made plain the fact that air moving over a surface, in fact, lessens the gravitational pull on that surface. And he discovered it in the cadaver of a human larynx. Air blowing over the surface of a vocal fold makes the vocal fold lighter. If I took a piece of paper or a Kleenex and held it and blew across, it would raise. Well, guess what? Thrust of an airplane engine goes over the top of a wing, and the wing gets lighter and it goes up, unless it goes into the Hudson. Or a bird gets a better. Birds are just jealous of big metal thing. I don't blame the bird for bringing that plane. But I'm sure grateful for the technical abilities of one great pilot and calm waters. But that's another subject. So, again, these are ways that our body are built. Our spine is built a particular way that has a particular relationship to our ribs, that has a particular bearing on our diaphragm, which has a particular bearing on our lungs. And our lungs have a most phenomenal specific, flexible relationship to the glottis, which is where your larynx is. And that has a negotiable, interesting relationship to your sense and hearing of resonance, the inside of your head, and the vibrating surfaces of your head and your chest and so forth. These are all very specific, physical, organic, natural relationships. And we should not sell them short as some mercurial thing that happens to happen or doesn't happen to happen in this or that singer. If you want to learn how to sing, get your technique together, which is how you stand up, how you breathe, how you hold yourself, and move forward, because that's not the magic of singing. We sometimes get in that today, and we think that that is the magic of singing. Voices are glorious. I'm as much a vocal fetishist as the other person. But that's not singing. Singing is bringing into life a repeated, already thought of psychological circumstance of a great composer inspired by the metaphor of great use of great languages. It's about people. It's about human beings. I believe people pay vast sums of money to go to the opera every night across the world because they want to be moved, not in a generic way. They want to be specifically moved in their life to be closer to what they determine to be the meaning of their life. Like Joseph Campbell said, it is not so much about searching for the meaning of life as it is searching for meaning in life. And to me, this is what the arts and humanities are. And as a singer, we make that audible. Those are some of the precise ideas that I'm offering to you as how Thomas Hampson thinks about what he does and why he does it. So that aside, let's tackle some of these wonderful ideas in the context of some of the great vocal literature today.